Believe it or not, the traditional guard is dying. Well, maybe not entirely. You see, as time went on, players continued to get more skilled, more specifically, taller players. In the past, point guards were able to or built to do things that the other bigger positions couldn't or just weren't conditioned to do. That gave the point guard position so much value because even though they were undersized in comparison to most of the league, they possessed skills that weren't easily replicated by other positions. But in the modern era, this just isn't the case. Not only are taller players just as skilled as the smaller players, but they are also simply just better overall. Let me explain. In basically every sport, the players within the game are categorized based on what they can contribute on the floor, and basketball is no different. For example, a superstar is contributing a significantly higher amount of production than an everyday role player. Higher production equals higher value. And at the end of the day, value is what you're really looking for in a player. So, let's quantify this thing called value. As the NBA continues to progress, so do numbers and data, which ultimately leads to advanced stats like Raptor. Raptor essentially quantifies how much a player adds or subtracts from their team's overall performance, based on multiple factors like box score stats, on and off-court comparisons, and a few other metrics. It's broken down into offensive Raptor and defensive Raptor, and the sum of the two is the finalized stat, labeled as total Raptor. At a caveman level, it quantifies a player's value. Now that you know what this stat does, let's back it up with some context. On a typical scale, a total Raptor of +8 to +10 is in the MVP top of the league level status. Think of a guy like Nikola Jokic, someone who dictates nearly the entire offense of his team, whether it be scoring himself or creating for others. This past season, Jokic had a total Raptor of +8.9, essentially meaning he will give his team a 9-point advantage as opposed to an average NBA player giving you 0. The next notch down would be in the +4 to +6 range. These types of guys are your all-NBA level talents. Think about Stephen Curry, someone that is a constant threat no matter where he is and if he has the ball or not. A +6.3 total Raptor belonged to Steph Curry this past season. So similar to Jokic, he's giving his team about a 6-point advantage compared to a normal NBA player giving 0. And finally, the +2 to +3 range is typically your borderline all-star level players or the elite in the pool of role players. Unexpectedly, Luka Doncic actually falls somewhat close to this range, coming in at +3.7 total Raptor this past season. He is out of the range, but not quite in the next range up, and definitely not convincingly. So that's the context. 3 separate ranges, 3 separate levels of players. In the past, some of the most notable small guards were the Steve Nashes, John Stocktons, Kevin Johnsons, and Isaiah Thomases of the world, all of them being all-star or superstar caliber guards, and their value reflected exactly that. Each of these guys were on average producing a +5.3 total Raptor, all of it coming from offensive Raptor to be specific. Every one of these small guards had a negative in the defensive Raptor category. However, the negative was never severe, the most being Steve Nash's -1.54 and the least being -0.1. Despite being undersized, their values never dropped shockingly low. They maintained their range of an all-NBA level talent. But what happens when everyone starts to get bigger? Fast forward to the modern era, and the all-star or superstar caliber small guards are beginning to show signs of diminishing statistical value. Trae Young and Jalen Brunson are perfect examples of this trend. Both are very good, if not great, individual offensive guards. However, the defensive side of the ball isn't their strong suit, and it reduces their value significantly. Just this last season, Trae Young had an offensive Raptor of +5, a very respectable number. However, his defensive Raptor was a -2.8, leaving his total Raptor at just +2.2, which is more on the end of an elite role player. And it's a very similar case to Jalen Brunson. However, the playoffs are where Jalen's numbers really jump off the charts. The Knicks had their best playoff run in quite some time without a doubt, and Jalen Brunson was a major piece to the puzzle. But how valuable was he really? Over the course of the playoffs, Brunson recorded an offensive Raptor of plus 4.9, which again is a very respectable number. However, like Trae Young, his defensive Raptor tanks his value. Brunson had an eye-opening minus 3.7 defensive Raptor, leaving his total at just plus 1.2, a number well below the level of an elite role player. Obviously, offense isn't a problem with these guys, but the value of defense becomes a lot more significant because they are small guards in an era filled with do-it-all types of wings and forwards.
Intended for Holiday, picked off by Giannis. Every night's a Holiday for Antetokounmpo.
But maybe these guys are simply not known for defense, so they were destined to be in the negatives no matter how big or small they are, right? Well, not exactly. Let's look at Luka Doncic again, another player that is viewed as a defensive liability. As mentioned earlier, he's clocking in at a plus 3.7 total Raptor, a lower number than expected from a player of Luka's caliber. However, his case isn't the same as Trae and Brunson. Trae Young and Jalen Brunson's low totals were a result of negatives in the defensive category, bringing down their totals. However, Luka has positives in both offense and defense, despite being a poor individual defender. He recorded a plus 2.2 on offense and plus 1.5 on defense. He isn't the fastest nor the quickest guy in the world. In fact, Trae Young and Jalen Brunson are both quicker than Luka, so what's making such a big difference? His size. Luka isn't the typical small guard. He's built like a forward but playing the position of point guard, meaning in situations where switching is just not an option for Trae and Jalen, it may be one for Luka. Obviously, you're not putting any of these guys on an island with the opposing team's best perimeter player, but Luka is big enough to guard a handful of guys in the post, where Trae and Jalen just aren't. That versatility advantage is significant enough to cause such a difference in the total statistical value between these players. But this isn't always the case. There are cases where small or traditional sized guards aren't as much of a liability despite being smaller than most of the players. Steph Curry being one of the biggest outliers of all time. But that's just it. He's an outlier. But in terms of the average small guard, defense is always going to be something they need to work extra hard at just to make up the difference between their bigger counterparts. It isn't as easy as it was in the past, and going bigger and more versatile is becoming normal. So maybe death isn't the right word. Maybe the traditional guard is simply being redefined.